Like every week, we learn some new and disturbing information about the Zika virus. A study released today now shows that not only can the virus affect the brains of babies in the womb, but it can also cause problems for adult brains. Well, Baruch Shemtov with more on the findings.
A new study published in the journal Cell Stem Cell finds that the Zika virus could impact stem cells known as neural progenitor cells in adult brains. Since these cells are essential for learning and memory development, there are fears that this new finding could mean that infected adults will be more at risk for depression and even Alzheimer's.
We have to be very cautious before we try and apply animal studies or results of animal studies to human beings.
But with many New Yorkers concerned about proven consequences of Zika and dozens of pregnant women in New York now infected with the virus, Mayor de Blasio expressed his concern earlier this week and emphasized the need for funding to remain vigilant in the fight against Zika.
Also tonight on Just One Station, protests over a controversial plan to battle the bugs that carry the Zika virus. Some residents say it's harmful to their health.
Belky's neighbors here say this is like a sci-fi horror movie for them. Scientists want to release millions of genetically modified mosquitoes into their neighborhood. They say it will help stop Zika. Protesters outside Florida Keys mosquito control and sign after sign in the Key Haven neighborhood.
It scares the hell out of me.
22 million genetically modified mosquitoes, so it's scary.
Yay!
Neighbors worried they'll become lab rats if millions of genetically modified mosquitoes are released here.
The big concern is the unknown.
Researchers say Key Haven, an island community just north of Key West, is the perfect spot for the experiment.
They're doing pretty much a clinical research trial without any informed consent, and we're going to be used as the test subjects.
The test study is already happening in the Cayman Islands. Scientists release male mosquitoes with a special gene so they can't mature. Those bugs mate with females, and over time, the process kills off mosquitoes that carry viruses like Zika. More and more of these signs popping up in the neighborhood over the last couple of months, people even wearing these stickers on their clothes. They feel like they have no say over whether they become part of a science experiment. But the FDA says the mosquitoes won't have significant impacts on the environment. A British company named Oxitec would develop the mosquitoes and release them.
Not had any problem with individuals anywhere in the world that has been tested.
Mosquito board member Tom McDonald is for the genetically modified mosquitoes, especially with the increasing threat of Zika.
Why we're not doing everything that we possibly can to move forward with this project is almost criminal in a sense of it's a health hazard.
He says it's way safer than using chemical sprays. These neighbors are not convinced.
We don't want it. We don't want to be used as guinea pigs.
If they follow through with it, I absolutely feel like a lab rat.
Let's continue our team coverage on the Zika threat with how schools are preparing for the virus.
The sizes?
Lots of parents and kids at the Anita M. Harder Elementary School. They attend the 6 schools in Wynwood. They're within the Zika impact zone.
I'm going to do everything I can to protect my child from this, so I'm here to get the long sleeve.
The health department recommending dressing students in long sleeves and long pants. So for those families that need a little help with the cost, free, provided by state funds.
Me being from the islands, I don't worry about it too much.
But he scored a pair of long pants and long sleeve shirts for his child, paid for by a state grant.
They've given state funds of $10 per student to the district.
But a worry, the issue popping up at this Wynwood private school. Not a new issue, but with school beginning soon, parents and employees at the Metropolitan International School, they claim the aerial spraying has caused irritations, sore throats, and
people are having headaches, and I honestly think it started once I started spraying things in the area.
The health department assures residents the spray is safe in the amount that's released, but moms are jittery.
I'm biking with him, it's 11 o'clock, and all of a sudden I see the plane zipping right above us.
The school owner's okay with the spraying, just not when students are on their way to and from school.
It's the emblem of Lehigh County, displayed on government buildings and official documents.
I get it with my water bill, I get it with my garbage bill.
Look closely and you might see why the county seal and flag don't fly for everyone, including Candace Winkler.
The cross is literally a symbol of Jesus Christ's crucifixion. There's a constitutional law about separation of church and state, and it seems very simple to me.
So earlier this week, Winkler, along with 3 other Lehigh County residents and the Freedom from Religion Foundation, filed a federal lawsuit against the county. It alleges the Latin cross at the center of the seal violates the First and 14th Amendments and excludes those who are not religious.
I do pay taxes, and I think that my voice does matter, and I think the constitutionality of the issue matters.
But some residents, like John Pearson, want the seal to stay the same.
I've been here 38 years and I think it looks fine. If you want to put 2 seals on it, that's fine, but you know what? Don't take what's good off. The cross is good.
Similar lawsuits have been filed across the country, says attorney John Dorsey of the Power 10 Legal Group, who is not related to the case.
Anytime you raise an issue where the government seems to be imposing or endorsing one religion to the exclusion of others, even those who do not have any religion, it can be interpreted as infringing on their right.
For some time, Major Steve Lewis, an officer stationed at Colorado's Peterson Air Force Base, has displayed an open Bible on his desk. He recently removed it in an effort to avoid making people uncomfortable or creating controversy. Nonetheless, a religion versus religious freedom firestorm has been launched. On Wednesday, Mikey Weinstein of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation submitted a letter on the matter to the Colorado Springs Independent. Highlights include Weinstein accusing Major Lewis of using the book as a religious display to promote others to his Christian faith and characterizing that move as a disastrous travesty. In response, Todd Starnes of Todd's America Dispatch asserted that Weinstein earns a paycheck by trying to eradicate Christianity from the armed forces. Starnes also challenged the bravery and commitment of the enlisted opposed to the book's presence, asking if they are terrified of a Bible, how in the world will they be able to muster the courage to fight the enemy? It is unclear when or if the Bible will return.
Well, the issue of freedom of speech and religion is playing out tonight on social media, and at the center of all of this, an Ellis County attorney.
Now, Mark Griffin is under fire for Facebook postings like this that read, "I start a trial next Monday. Monday will begin with me on my knees, asking God for his wisdom, his peace, and his passion as I stand for the voice of my client." Well, the county district attorney and a judge have both told him to stop, but the attorney says it's his right.
Defense attorney Mark Griffith doesn't shy away from the fact that religion plays a big role in his work.
If you want to pick a fight with me about my religion, you probably picked a fight with the wrong person.
His Waxahachie law firm, Griffith & Associates, is very active on Facebook. They have more than 25,000 followers. That's where he oftentimes calls for prayer. This time, the Ellis County DA's office feels he went too far. In a motion filed last week, the DA's office claims Griffith violated Texas ethics rules by posting too much information about an active case. And they say he offered his opinion about the innocence of a client. 2 things the DA argues shouldn't happen. To prove their point, they include several Facebook examples. They say all are inappropriate, and they all also include some type of religious reference.
I certainly argued to the judge that I have a right under the First Amendment not only to my religion, but to my speech. And with regards to what they're arguing about, those 2 things intertwine.
In a written statement, as for Facebook, Griffith hasn't slowed down. Here he is calling for prayer on social media about this very motion. That was just a couple of hours ago.
For restrooms at Target will likely go down soon, now that transgender customers will have another bathroom option at the national retail chain. Target says it's spending $20 million to have a private bathroom in every one of its nearly 1,800 stores by next year, responding to customer protests of its policy allowing transgender individuals to use whichever restroom corresponds with their gender identity. The company said Wednesday that the new bathrooms will be accessible to all customers. Protests started at Target stores after the company said in April that it welcomed transgender employees and guests to use the restroom or fitting room that corresponds with their gender identity. The company is making the announcement after North Carolina became one of the first states to enact legislation requiring transgender people to use the bathroom corresponding to the gender listed on their birth certificate. The American Family Association has gathered more than 1.3 million signatures on a petition to boycott Target in protest. The group called Target's policy, quote, a danger to wives and daughters, unquote, and called on Target to offer single occupancy bathrooms. Target on Wednesday reported its first decline in same-store sales in 2 years and warned that sales could fall in each of the next 2 quarters as it struggles with lower shopper traffic to its stores.
First, it was North Carolina. Then it was Target. Now homeless shelters are the new front in the battle over transgender rights. TheHill.com reports that new proposed federal regulations would permit people to stay in homeless shelters based on their gender identity. In other words, if a man identifies as a woman, he would be allowed to stay at a women's shelter.
The Department of Housing and Urban Development is expected in September to finalize regulations that would allow people to stay in homeless shelters based on the gender they identify with. The proposal has set off a firestorm, pitting LGBT groups against religious organizations that operate many homeless shelters. HUD's proposed regulation instructs homeless shelters to disregard the, quote, complaints of other shelter residents, end quote, who feel uncomfortable living with someone who is transgender. Congress has not passed discrimination protection for transgender people at homeless shelters, so the rules would only apply to those shelters that receive financial assistance from the federal government.
Today, for the first time, the State Department acknowledged there was a link between a $400 million cash payment to Iran and the release of 4 American prisoners. Republicans call that ransom, but the administration denies it.
The administration now admits that they held on to the cash until it was clear that the prisoners had left Iran. But U.S. officials still deny that this was ransom because the money was owed to Iran as part of a failed arms deal 35 years ago. What we know is that a plane loaded with Swiss francs and euros took off from a Geneva airport January 17th at the same time that a plane carrying the prisoners departed Tehran. The planes crisscrossed in the sky. Today, the administration admitted to the link because they said they wanted maximum leverage, fearing Iran would renege. Many Republicans say that's clearly a ransom payment to a state sponsor of terrorism. And Scott, they accused President Obama of lying when he insisted just a few weeks ago that the U.S. doesn't pay ransom.
And all of this was a side deal to the nuclear agreement as well. Margaret, thank you very much.
A little boy carried out of rubble into a waiting ambulance. A moment amidst the mayhem. A moment like so many others here in Aleppo. 5-year-old Omran Dagnish unable to even cry. Still unsure if his family survived. These images have now reverberated around the world. But will anything really change? UN Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura is hoping it will. He's asking for a 48-hour humanitarian ceasefire.
And I again insist on behalf of the Secretary General of the UN.
A series of bombings within 24 hours has killed at least 11 people and injured more than 200 in southeastern Turkey. After 2 deadly car bombings overnight, a roadside bomb exploded by a military vehicle carrying soldiers near the town of Bitlis. The first car bomb exploded in the Kurdish majority town of Van late Wednesday. 2 civilians and a police officer lost their lives, while 70 were injured, officials said. Hours later, a second car bomb shook the town of Elazığ. The city's governor said the attack killed at least 3 police officers, while more than 140 people were injured. The Turkish government said the Kurdish PKK was responsible for the deadly attacks.
Meanwhile, that IGAD report has found that Tanzania is the second biggest contributor of foreign fighters to Al-Shabaab's networks. It's also warned that the country has a number of extremist hotspots within its very own borders.
Certainly won't come as a surprise to the Tanzanian authorities, who have long warned of the risk that Al-Shabaab poses, but it does give us much more detail about what's happening here. The report says that there are extremist hotspots in Dar es Salaam, Arusha, Mtwara and Mwanza, and says that groups linked to Al-Shabaab have extensive coverage in Tanzania. It also says that hundreds of Tanzanians have gone overseas to join groups linked to Al-Shabaab, and that many have returned and pose a bigger threat. It does say, though, that people's primary motivation are financial, and that for the most part they are trading with Al-Shabaab. And security experts here say that they don't have capability in a military sense. But the government is not taking any risks. It has increased its spending on anti-terror work, and it continues to battle extremists in the Tanga caves in the north of the country, because it knows that the biggest threat that Tanzania faces is terrorism.
Breakaway Taliban faction in Afghanistan has appointed a new leader. The faction fell under the radar last year after the assassination of its then leader. His nephew has now been elected as the new head of the group and has promised to fight foreign forces and to avenge the death of his uncle. Well, according to a report by US think tank Stratfor, Taliban infighting is one of the main factors complicating America's military exit from the region, as is the group's hold over large areas of the country, as the red areas on this map from the report indicate. And the black areas show Islamic State's foothold in the country, also a headache for America.
Staying with Libya, authorities there have tipped off the Italian government about a suspected secret cell of ISIL supporters in Milan. That's according to various media reports. It sparked fresh concerns over the connections between ISIL in Libya and Italy.
The Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera reported on Sunday that when the Libyan army forced ISIL out of its stronghold in Sirte last week, they found documents in the terror group's headquarters pointing to the existence of a secret cell in the Italian city of Milan. The group's ringleader was allegedly Moez Ben Abdelkader Fazani, a Tunisian who'd lived in Italy for a decade and served a prison sentence there for fighting with Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. When he was deported back to Tunisia in 2012, he then allegedly travelled to Syria to fight with the Islamic State group and then to Libya, and has since recruited a network of sympathisers from among his old connections in Italy. The Italian authorities have refused to comment on the media reports, simply saying they are monitoring certain suspect individuals and that they take every warning of terrorist activity seriously. The story has fueled long-running fears that ISIL could be using the migrant route from Libya to Italy to traffic its own terrorists to Europe.
The Italian Coast Guard says they rescued 246 migrants from a wooden boat in the Mediterranean on Wednesday. The Coast Guard says one of the migrants required urgent medical care and a rescue helicopter was dispatched. More than 1 million people fleeing war and poverty in the Middle East, Africa and elsewhere arrived in the European Union last year. Almost 200,000 are bottled up in centres in Italy and Greece, unable to head north due to border closures.
Twitter has just announced it has suspended 235,000 accounts linked to terrorism over the past 6 months. This comes after the White House pressured Silicon Valley to crack down. Terror groups like ISIS use social media to recruit new fighters, spread propaganda, and communicate with overseas militants.
Twitter says it has suspended a total of 360,000 accounts since the middle of 2015.
At least 3 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed and several others wounded in clashes with pro-Russia fighters in the east of Ukraine. A government official said the positions of the army were shelled by the pro-Russia militias in the volatile region. The militias also reported heavy shelling of their positions by the army in Donetsk and Horlivka. They say the attacks cut electricity supply to hundreds of homes and a coal mine. Ukrainian troops and pro-Russia fighters have engaged in sporadic fighting despite a 2015 truce between the two sides. More than 9,500 people have been killed in the conflict since 2014.
Japan has once again accused China of sending its Coast Guard ships into waters surrounding the contested islands in the East China Sea. Japan's foreign ministry has said in a statement that China continues to take unilateral actions that raise tensions. Tokyo has condemned the intrusions as unacceptable and a violation of Japan's sovereignty. Japan says that there has been nearly 30 intrusions into the disputed waters by Chinese vessels since August 5.
Japan's Kyodo News Agency reports that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has resumed the production of plutonium. In a written interview, the DPRK's Atomic Energy Institute said it is also producing highly enriched uranium necessary for nuclear arms and power as scheduled. The institute is in charge of the DPRK's main nuclear facilities at the Gyeongbyon complex. South Korea's foreign ministry has responded to the report, saying that such activities are a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions, and the South will take necessary measures.
The United States has decided to deploy a new missile defense system in South Korea to counter any potential threat from North Korea. Local activists have put their heads together to come up with a novel form of protest.
There's no need for this deployment, not only here but anywhere in South Korea. I hope that this demonstration will show our resolve, show our will, and make the central government take note.
The shield location is only hundreds of meters away from where I live. I strongly oppose it.
As a woman, I'm not ashamed to be bold because we must win the battle.
They keep a very close watch on any activists. They're very afraid of the fight to oppose the THAAD system becoming an international issue.
A disastrous flood has been wreaking havoc on Louisiana since last week. Downpours have dumped up to 30 inches of rain in some areas. The floodwaters have damaged tens of thousands of homes, leaving many residents stranded or homeless, and more than a dozen people have been killed. The Red Cross is calling the disaster the worst to hit the United States since Superstorm Sandy, and it's far from over. But just by looking at national media coverage, you might not know it's even happening. Many noticed several major news outlets had failed to put even one story about the flooding on their homepage when it was at its worst over the weekend. And President Obama did sign a major disaster declaration on Sunday, but as of Thursday morning, he had yet to make a public address as he did with Superstorm Sandy in 2012. So why does it seem like no one is treating the flooding in Louisiana for what it truly is, a disaster? Officials in Louisiana have a few ideas.
When you have a storm that is unnamed, it wasn't a tropical storm, it wasn't a hurricane. A lot of times people underestimate the impact that it would have. But this is historic.
And a rep for the Federal Emergency Management Agency said, you had the Olympics, you've got the election, and if you looked at the national news, you're probably only on the third or fourth page. The Red Cross has estimated it will cost at least $30 million to repair the devastation in Louisiana once the floodwaters recede. The organization is encouraging donations.
It hit hard, it hit fast, it hit with an intensity we hadn't seen before. Those are the words of Fire Chief Mark Hartwig describing the wildfire in San Bernardino County, California, that has forced a mass evacuation. The runaway fire exploded overnight, torching more than 30,000 acres and an untold number of homes. Nearly 83,000 people have been evacuated. 34,000 homes are in the path of the fire.
Massive flames tearing through miles of dry brush. Unstoppable. This is the nightmare wildfire Chief Mike Wachowski has always feared.
In my 40 years of fighting fire, I've never seen fire behavior so extreme.
Unprecedented, they say, the result of 5 years of drought. Powerful winds are driving the fire directly into desert communities, consuming local landmarks and home.
That building totally gone.
After home after home. Despite an all-out air and ground assault, the fire continues to grow. This plane dropped its entire load, 12,000 gallons of retardant. It barely made a dent. In less than 24 hours, the Blue Cut fire mushroomed to 46 square miles, the size of the city of San Francisco, so wide an area that firefighters could not reach homes in time. Ronnie Moore watched helplessly as his house was destroyed.
What's it like to sit here and watch this?
This is the worst thing ever. I just lost so much
An earthquake measuring 5.8 on the Richter scale has struck just off the Queensland coast. Families from Cairns to Rockhampton felt the tremor that lasted for up to 30 seconds.
Magnitude 5.8 earthquake strong enough to send goods flying from the shelves at this IGA in Townsville. The quake, the largest in the state in 20 years, struck 70 kilometres off the coast of Bowen, but tremors were felt from as far north as Cairns down to Rockhampton. It sent people running from hotels, offices and pubs.
I was sitting on the lounge with my son and it just shook and shook, heaps of times. It was awful, horrible.
I was just doing some cleaning and all the glasses started shaking on top of the coffee machine.
Mackay Mayor Greg Williamson was mid-interview when the quake struck. Listen to the building rumble in the background.
What we're doing with the first principles is a bloody earthquake. Is that an actual earthquake?
By 5 p.m, there had been 6 aftershocks, one of them caught on camera on Hamilton Island.